It was a rousing romantic comedy.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway?
One that provided a revealing look at America's #1 sex goddess.
I can feel the goose pimples.
But the white-hot sexuality of Marilyn Monroe scorched the censors
Would you mind fastening my straps in the back?
and touched off a blaze of controversy that sent the actress's personal life into a devastating tailspin.
Sorry, I have to go.
A behind-the-scenes glimpse at Hollywood's most sizzling sex farce.
Hi.
And a rare look at the censored footage they said was too hot for the big screen.
Don't stop. Don't ever stop.
On Backstory, The 7-Year Itch.
And now that I have your attention, I want to warn all you girls and women of New York about an evil, dangerous, perfectly dreadful married man who lives downstairs in my building.
The 7-Year Itch blew the lid off 1950s conservatism.
Hey, wait a minute!
It shocked audiences with its irreverent look at marital infidelity.
I mean, I wouldn't be lying on the floor in the middle of the night in some man's apartment drinking champagne if he wasn't married.
And showcased Marilyn Monroe in her most sexually suggestive role to date. The film was based on George Axelrod's popular 1952 Broadway play about a married man who has an affair with his attractive upstairs neighbor. Hollywood couldn't wait to cash in on the smash hit. But in the 1950s, movies did not enjoy the artistic freedom that live theater had always taken for granted. Any film produced in Hollywood was subject to the scrutiny of the all-powerful Hays Office.
Well, the Hays Office was the self-censorship body that the Hollywood studios created when they were very fearful that the government was going to step in and create a much more onerous form of censorship.
The vulgar, the cheap, and the tawdry is out. There is no room on the screen at any time for pictures which offend against common decency, and these the industry will not allow.
The censors proclaimed that any film based on the 7-Year Itch would be a blatant violation of the production code, which stated that adultery must never be the subject of comedy or laughter. Hollywood studios quickly backed off from the provocative play.
It is surreal that this went on. This kind of a minority opinion could affect the whole course of the movie business, and everybody was so terrified. The studios were terrified of these people.
But for Academy Award-winning writer-director Billy Wilder, The 7-Year Itch was not only a great film waiting to be made, it was also an irresistible challenge waiting to be met. Wilder had miraculously managed to sidestep the rigid rules of censorship many times in the past, making films with controversial themes like seduction, adultery, and alcoholism, and he wasted no time in approaching George Axelrod about purchasing the rights to his play.
Billy Wilder was my hero. I remember the phone rang in my apartment one night, and Billy Wilder from Hollywood, it's like having a call from God, you know?
Axelrod insisted that no film version be made until the play had completed its Broadway run. But with Wilder on board, The 7-Year Itch once again became a hot property in Hollywood. Among the contenders bidding on the project was 20th Century Fox, which had a leg up on its competition, in the form of a 28-year-old sex goddess named Marilyn Monroe.
In retrospect, although the 50s is clearly a time of very real political repression and social and sexual repression, you can see those early signs of changing values, and Monroe was clearly part of that.
She sang of love just as she lived for love, like a Lorelei, flaunting her charms as she lured men on and on to their eternal destruction.
Marilyn's film career skyrocketed with such hits as Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In 1953, a nude photo of the actress appeared on the first issue of Playboy magazine and sent shockwaves across the nation.
I don't think there's any question but what the success and the popularity of Marilyn Monroe is directly related to her more obvious sexuality and the very fact that she did pose nude and then admit it and make jokes about it, say that she had nothing on but the radio. And by the end of the year, she was the biggest star in Hollywood.
After Fox secured the film rights to The 7-Year Itch, attention then turned to the casting of Marilyn's enviable co-star. But because the part of Richard Sherman was that of the quintessential everyman, the filmmakers rejected Gary Cooper and other suave, classically handsome leading men. They were looking for someone plain, average, and not necessarily handsome. They were also looking for someone with a comedic touch. Enter Walter Matthau, a rubber-faced actor whom Axelrod had spotted playing a small role in a Broadway play.
The old nostalgia. Never misses. Never misses? What am I trying to do? I'll call her up and I'll tell her not to come, that's all. Why ask for trouble? I don't know her number. I don't even know her name.
After seeing Matthau's performance in the part, Billy Wilder believed he had found his man. But 20th Century Fox was unwilling to take the risk on a newcomer, and Wilder next turned his sights on the actor who had originated the role on Broadway, Tom Ewell.
Absolutely ridiculous. The first night Helen leaves and I'm bringing dames into the apartment.
Wilder knew that casting this ordinary-looking actor opposite Marilyn Monroe would turn the 7-Year Itch into the ultimate male fantasy. The studio agreed, and Tom Ewell won the role. But what the filmmakers didn't count on was the wrath of the Hayes office, which was eager to pounce on the production. Wilder and Axelrod had taken all explicit references to adultery out of their script, but they had hoped to merely hint at an extramarital affair in a short scene where a maid finds a hairpin in Ewell's bed. Studio head Darryl Zanuck and producer Charles Feldman adamantly refused the idea, fearing a code rejection. The exasperated Wilder complained that the movie was made under straight-jacketed conditions.
The picture, you know, it's very simply, I mean, it's about a guy who has an affair with a girl when his wife is away for the summer. And then he feels terribly guilty for it, and the guilts are very funny. But if he hasn't had the affair with the girl, he's got nothing to feel guilty about, so the picture doesn't really make very much sense.
The Hayes office demanded that much of Axelrod's most entertaining dialogue be removed from the script as well.
George Axelrod is a great writer of sexual comedy lines. It is very troubling, I think, to most filmmakers who want to adapt a humorous play from Broadway to Hollywood to find that the funniest lines and the funniest moments are being just ripped away by a censorship board.
We were hamstrung because of the censorship. You'd swap them 2 darns for a damn. You're never allowed to say son of a bitch. I fought for son of a bitch. Couldn't have it.
Oh, the hell with that. Be goddamned if I'll tell her.
We did as much as we could, but boy, I tell you, they were really stringent.
Increasingly frustrated, the disheartened filmmakers feared that their once lively sex comedy was losing its sizzle. But what the censors underestimated was the cinematic genius of Billy Wilder and the pulse-pounding potency of Marilyn Monroe on the big screen.
Getting married? That'd be worse than living at the club. Then I'd have to start getting in by 1 o'clock again.
Very true, you probably would. At least occasionally.
When the 7-Year Itch began filming in September of 1954, Marilyn Monroe was no longer just Hollywood's greatest sex symbol. She was the world's most famous newlywed.
The romance that thrills the world. The marriage of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio attracts a record crowd to the San Francisco court where the ceremony is performed.
Her marriage to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio earlier that year had set off a media firestorm.
Nice work, Marilyn. And the same to you, Joe.
Fox publicists fanned the flames by alerting the press of the star's every move, and the Hollywood gossip machine turned its spotlight on the filming of The 7-Year Itch.
People like Marilyn Monroe are always threats to the moralists in the establishment who are trying to protect their fellow man against an excess of passion.
How would you like to come down here and have a drink with me? Maybe.
Why, thanks. I'd love it.
You would?
Sure, it'd be fun. Let me just go put something on. I'll go into the kitchen and get dressed.
The kitchen?
Yes, when it's hot like this, you know what I do? I keep my undies in the icebox.
In the icebox?
See you in a minute.
The Hayes office was also keeping a watchful eye over the production. And if that weren't enough, the filmmakers also had another mighty group of moralists breathing down their necks, the Catholic Legion of Decency.
The power they had rested in the fact that at Sunday Mass, they could tell millions of Catholics that on pain of undermining their soul, they must not go to the movies that the Legion was condemning.
Priests representing the Legion of Decency hovered around the set with copies of the provocative script in hand.
There was a Monsignor Biddle, who was the Catholic Legion of Decency guy, who was spearheading a lot of this. And finally, they would say to me, why don't you, Billy, just sit down with Monsignor Biddle and write it with him, and the whole thing will be, Yeah, then we won't have any trouble with the censorship. I said, I don't think I want a screen credit with Monsignor Biddle.
Equally frustrating for Billy Wilder was his leading lady's highly erratic behavior. Marilyn's breathtaking rise to superstardom had done little to curb her lifelong pattern of self-destruction. Suffering from bouts of depression, the actress often appeared distracted on the set and had trouble remembering her lines. But Billy Wilder soon recognized that Marilyn's luminous screen presence eclipsed all the endless takes and the frustrating delays.
No matter how you suffered through those days and weeks and pulling those lines out like a dentist, they looked so absolutely and totally natural once you see them, and you loved on the screen, and that's the one that's thing that survived.
And I get to speak lines, too. I had onions at lunch. I had garlic dressing at dinner. But he'll never know, because I stay kissing sweet, the new dazzle-dent way.
You do that beautifully.
She was a wonderful, wonderful, strange, sad, tragic, mixed up, authentic genius. Magical on the screen.
It shakes me. It quakes me. It makes me feel goose pimply all over.
There's no doubt that when you're able to feature a star who's charismatic and as appealing sensually as Marilyn Monroe, you know, you're bringing a lot to the film. True, he lost the adulterous relationship. True, he lost a great many of Axelrod's wittiest lines. But in place of that, he did have Marilyn Monroe.
Because now I'm going to take you in my arms and kiss you. Very quickly and very hard.
Hey, wait a minute! What happened? I kind of lost track.
I don't know. Well, this is terrible. There's nothing I can say except that I'm terribly sorry. Nothing like this ever happened to me before in all of my life.
Honest? Happens to me all the time.
Although her character was known only as the girl, Marilyn clearly became the star of the film.
It was a mixed blessing. Marilyn was wonderful. It wouldn't have been the hit it was without her. On the other hand, she unbalanced the whole picture because it's essentially the guy's story. You see, it's really about the man, but it became about Marilyn Monroe.
Wait a minute, Dickie boy. Let's just take it easy. What blonde in the kitchen?
Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe it's Marilyn Monroe.
While filming on location in New York, Marilyn created pandemonium everywhere she went.
Well, we're here to make the 7-year itch.
Location shots on the 7-year itch?
Uh-huh.
That's your latest picture, right?
Yes. Yes, I'm looking forward to it very much.
Joe didn't come along with you, huh?
No.
Did he see you off in Hollywood last night?
Oh, yes.
Well, you brought your hairdresser and your drama coach and 4 men from 20th Century Fox. All this and no Joe, huh?
It's a shame.
Sensing a good story, Hollywood columnist Walter Winchell phoned his friend Joe DiMaggio back in Los Angeles and suggested he fly to New York to witness the excitement his wife was generating. But by the time DiMaggio joined his wife in New York, their 8-month-old marriage was already showing signs of strain.
Joe had understandable, somewhat old-world ideas about, a woman staying at home and having babies and dressing rather demurely, and that wasn't what Marilyn wanted. Marilyn wanted a career.
At 1 o'clock in the morning of September 15th, Joe looked on as hordes of fans and photographers, lured by Fox publicity, began lining the streets. They were about to witness film history as Marilyn shot what would become her most famous scene.
She understood her skirt would be blowing up, and she noticed in the mirror that you could see through the panties. So she requested and put on a second pair of panties, 2 pair of panties. And in the dressing room, it covered the problem. But outside on the street with 5,000 onlookers, under the Klieg lights, it didn't cover the problem.
The leering onlookers whistled and cheered through take after take as Marilyn repeatedly missed her lines. An increasingly embarrassed and angry DiMaggio stood nearby with his hands thrust in his pockets, appearing visibly upset.
I would have been upset too if I was standing on the sidelines and there are 10 or 20,000 people there watching the skirt of your wife blowing overhead, Naturally, to begin with, take after take after take, and then the New Yorkers, various little comments being shouted from the sidelines, and many of those. So he didn't like it very much.
The more Marilyn delighted in the commotion, the more DiMaggio felt publicly humiliated.
That scene, that evening, was a pivotal moment in the marriage of Joe and Marilyn because it became clear that her role and her stardom and her independence clashed with his needs and his expectations of what she was and what she would be willing to be.
DiMaggio left the shoot in disgust, refusing any comment to the press. The couple quarreled bitterly that night in their hotel. Joe flew back to Los Angeles alone. Fox's publicity stunt had paid off for the studio, but it ended in disaster for Marilyn and Joe. Within weeks, their marriage was over. As word leaked out, the press descended on their home, and America watched in disbelief as the storybook romance of two superstars unraveled in less than 9 months.
Sorry, I have to go. I'm sorry.
When Monroe returned to the set, she appeared sedated and confused. Billy Wilder took the flak when the studio complained about the overtime caused by Marilyn's behavior. Ironically, the footage shot on that infamous night in New York never made it to the screen. The noise of the crowds had made it unusable, and Wilder was forced to reshoot the scene in the privacy of the Fox lot. An exact replica of the theater was erected, and Marilyn submitted to another 40 takes. But by the time the Hayes office finished with it, movie audiences saw far less of Marilyn than the gawkers on Lexington Avenue had.
Didn't you just love the picture? I did, but I just felt so sorry for the creature at the end.
Sorry for the creature? Why'd you want him, to marry the girl?
He was kind of scary looking, but he wasn't really all bad. I think he just craved a little affection, you know, a sense of being loved and needed and wanted.
That's a very interesting point of view.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
Sort of cools the ankles, doesn't it?
The skirts went up over her head, which they used in the ads, but we couldn't use in the picture. If you look at the movie, this skirt never goes up above her knees here, really.
But the final result still wasn't free from controversy. The scene as shot continued, but the dialogue was considered too daring and was cut by the Hayes office before the film was released. But recently discovered in the Fox vaults was a rare print containing this deleted footage.
Oh, here comes another one. This one's even cooler. Must be an express. Don't you wish you had a skirt? I feel so sorry for you in those hot pants.
Another sequence that didn't escape the censors was this bathtub scene, where Marilyn gets her toe stuck in a faucet.
Then he made me play chopsticks. Then suddenly he turned on me, his eyes bulging. He was frothing at the mouth, just like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I knew it. I knew it. That's how these stories get started.
Billy Wilder's original version contained this provocative payoff that also lay hidden in the studio vaults for over 40 years.
And suddenly he turned on me, his eyes bulging. He was frothing at the mouth, just like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The 7-Year Itch completed production on November 4th, 1954. Zanuck was so eager to release the picture that he paid George Axelrod a $175,000 bonus for permission to open the film while the Broadway play was still running. Any initial doubts about the film had long since disappeared. It was clear that the 7-Year Itch would be a smash hit, and Marilyn Monroe's star would shine brighter than ever. Rarely in the history of motion pictures had any film received as much publicity as the 7-Year Itch. A 52-foot-high cutout of Marilyn was even erected in front of Lowe's State Theater in New York's Times Square. But for Marilyn Monroe, it was a symbol of success and of frustration. Marilyn now desperately wanted to escape the blonde bombshell persona she had worked so hard to create.
We were sitting one time at a coffee place, and they were putting up a huge picture of her from the 7-Year Itch. You know, where she stands over the subway grating? And she looked up and she said, "You see, that's all they think of me. That's what they think of me."
Said, what has Marilyn Monroe got that a million other women have and prefer not to show?
Very nice. Some girl.
I think it's very nice, but I'd rather it were me.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.
Well, it's pretty vulgar, if you ask me.
The 7-Year Itch opened on June 1st, 1955, Marilyn Monroe's 29th birthday. True to form, Marilyn arrived late to the premiere and created a near riot as she entered the theater on the arm of her ex-husband. The 7-Year Itch turned out to be an even bigger sensation than anyone had anticipated. Audiences and critics alike were bowled over by Marilyn's performance. The sizzling sex farce became Fox's biggest money-making hit of 1955. Marilyn was now one of the most powerful stars in Hollywood. She demanded approval over her scripts and directors, and she got it. Billy Wilder reteamed with Marilyn Monroe 4 years later in the irreverent sex comedy Some Like It Hot. Wilder and other progressive filmmakers like him continued to make film after film that pushed the boundaries of censorship. By 1968, the Hays Office had lost its stranglehold on Hollywood, and the code was completely revised. No longer enforcing censorship, the Motion Picture Association of America instituted the rating system that continues today. Over the next 7 years, Marilyn Monroe would make only a handful of films, each one showcasing her versatility and talent. But in 1962, Marilyn Monroe's career was cut short when the star was found dead of an apparent overdose of sleeping pills. She was only 36 years old. It was the death of a star and the birth of a Hollywood icon. While it appears delightfully innocent by contemporary standards, the 7-Year Itch tested the limits of censorship in an age governed by rigid moral codes.
Wish we had been able to do it the way we were able to do it on the stage. I mean, that was nobody's fault. That was just the times, you know. But for the conditions under which we had to make it, I think it's very good. And I'm delighted that it's there.
That's what's really exciting.
The 7-Year Itch remains an entertaining tribute to one of Hollywood's brightest stars and to the tenacious filmmakers who paved the way for artistic freedom.
Well, good night.
It was the film that proved that the world's hottest sex symbol was also a serious actress. It was the movie debut for two stars-to-be who were enjoying a real-life romance. And it was a shoot more filled with battles and bickering than the story it set out to tell.
We were convinced that the movie was going to be a disaster.
A star in trouble, a studio held hostage, and a tale of love both on and off the screen. On Backstory Bus Stop.
I found me that gal, just like you said. We're engaged.
Now, wait a minute. Somebody's got the wrong idea around here.
What do you mean, Cherry?
My name ain't Cherry. I told you, it's Sherry.
Oh, I can't see a fancy like that. Anyway, what's the matter with Cherry?
Well, it ain't dignified.
In 1956, moviegoers and critics were amazed by the latest film from Hollywood's reigning sex goddess, Marilyn Monroe.
That old black magic has me in its spell.
Bus Stop was a tender adaptation of William Inge's Broadway play about a weary saloon singer.
You're sure a good singer.
I'm a chanteuse.
And the naive young cowboy determined to win her.
Anything I ever wanted in this life, I just went out and got.
The role of the ambitious but vulnerable Cherie was the most personal that Monroe had ever played, and the film was her greatest labor of love.
What's he got on his mind, anyhow?
Me.
The result would be a movie triumph that proved to a skeptical Hollywood that Marilyn was an actress to be reckoned with.
Sure, I never had that on her before.
I was just knocked off my seat because she was absolutely fantastic.
By 1955, Marilyn Monroe was the world's most talked-about movie star.
Another handsome trophy to add to her ever-growing collection.
It's a great thrill. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ferris. And my thanks to Look magazine.
But after 25 films, the ambitious 29-year-old was hungry to achieve much more than big-screen stardom.
She said, I don't care about money, I just want to be wonderful. And by wonderful, she meant just the best that she could be and respected as an actress.
In 1955, the frustrated Marilyn stunned Hollywood by walking out of her contract at 20th Century Fox. Shock turned to ridicule when Monroe traveled to New York to study at the prestigious Actors Studio.
And when she met serious actors in New York, she realized that there was a world waiting for her.
At the studio, the insecure star fell under the influence of its strong-willed co-founder, Lee Strasberg. He encouraged Monroe to use her own experiences and emotions in performing. And after weeks with Strasberg, Marilyn grew more convinced of her potential as an actress. Projecting a newfound confidence, Marilyn returned to Los Angeles, armed with a series of demands for 20th Century Fox. She formed her own production company and insisted that the studio give her director approval. Desperate to bring the Marilyn magic back to the screen, Fox gave in.
Is it true that you submitted a list of directors that you would work with? I would rather say that I have director approval, and that is true.
Fox and Monroe quickly agreed on her next project, Bus Stop, based on the Broadway smash by Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright William Inge. To write the screenplay, Fox hired one of Hollywood's hottest talents, George Axelrod, co-author of Marilyn's previous screen hit, The 7-Year Itch.
I knew what she could do and what things that she couldn't do, and I omitted things that she couldn't do. You notice she doesn't have very many long speeches. The big thing around was that she could not ever remember word one. Nothing.
Oh, what was I supposed to say again?
To direct, both Fox and Marilyn agreed on Joshua Logan, whose credits included both the Broadway and screen versions of another William Inge triumph, Picnic. Logan wasn't eager to work with the infamously unreliable Marilyn, but when the two finally met over dinner, the director was won over by her childlike charm and signed on for the project.
Ain't it wonderful when somebody so terrible turns out to be so nice?
Logan was determined to make Bus Stop as different from Marilyn's past films as possible. First, he rejected a set of glamorous costume designs for her character, the struggling singer, Cherie.
They had made her look like she was a model, so the three of us went over to the wardrobe department, and we found this blouse and a skirt, and we had them copy that, and that was what she wore in the whole thing. And the costume guys never spoke to either of us again.
As shown in this rare behind-the-scenes footage, Monroe covered herself in white baby powder to create the washed-out look of an all-night singer who rarely sees sunlight.
We wanted to make it look like she'd never, ever, ever been outdoors in the sun. She slept all day.
Dad, I didn't even get to bed till 5.
5? Oh, no wonder you're so pale and white.
Actors Arthur O'Connell and Eileen Heckert next joined the cast. But with filming now just precious days away, Joshua Logan still desperately searched for one pivotal player, the co-starring role of Cherie's cowboy suitor.
Cut it. Sound.
After multiple screen tests, the role finally went to a 26-year-old movie newcomer. Don Murray was a rising stage performer who was then winning raves on Broadway in The Skin of Our Teeth.
I was no cowboy when I started in Bus Stop, I'll tell you that. I was brought up in Long Island, about 15 miles outside of New York City. The only thing I knew about animals were cats and dogs. I had no idea how to ride a horse. Every time I got near the camera, I stood up in my stirrups, pretending I was looking for Cherry, because I didn't want the audience to see me bouncing around in a saddle like that. So I had no idea how to play this wild maniac of a cowboy. And Josh Logan would just say to me things like, "Don," he said, "you are Attila the Hun." He said, "I don't want any aw shucks cowboy, I want Attila." He said, "I don't care how big a star Marilyn is, go over and take over the set." He said, "Leave no prisoners."
You know, I think he is crazy.
Murray wasn't the only fresh face at this bus stop. Among his co-stars was 24-year-old Hope Lang, who was making her film debut after impressing executives with a performance on live television.
There wasn't a lot of depth to Elma. Elma was... she was a waitress. I was a waitress in my mother's restaurant growing up, so I knew a little about what that was about. She reacted more than she did anything else.
I never heard of anyone married so young. That's all right. Oh, that's awful. All right.
Lang was even more excited to be making her film debut alongside her real-life fiancé, Don Murray. Remarkably, Fox executives had no idea that the two were a couple by the time that Lang joined the cast.
They didn't have any idea. They wanted to promote the idea that we met on the set.
Talk about angels. How about her?
And we couldn't convince them that that wasn't so.
The truth was much more interesting, and of course they ignored that. The truth was I met Hope when she was 17 years old, and she was just out of high school, and I was on Broadway. And then Joshua Logan saw her in a television show, and of course he saw me in Skin of Our Teeth. Fox Studios signed her to a multiple-year contract, and they signed me at the same time without knowing that we knew each other.
By March of 1956, the stage was set for the most important film of Marilyn Monroe's career. She realized that her fledgling production company and her credibility as an actress were both at stake. And as some in Hollywood gleefully predicted failure, she would now have to give the performance of a lifetime. When Backstory returns, a skittish star and an ailing actor have a showdown on the set.
One thing I can't stand is a bully.
Who says I'm a boy?
I do!
The proceeding was brought to you by Office Depot. Nobody in the world sells more office products to more businesses than Office Depot.
Taking care of business. There's nobody in the world taking care of business.
Nobody in the world sells more office products than Office Depot. Like HP digital cameras and photo printers. Buy both now during HP days at Office Depot and save $100 instantly.
Tonight on AMC, Marilyn Monroe gives one of her finest performances as a sexy singer who's abducted by lovesick cowboy Don Murray in Bus Stop. Then, on Madcat Mondays, Julie Andrews and Rock Hudson star in the widescreen version of Blake Edwards' rollicking spy spoof, Darling Lily. And Backstory, Bus Stop, takes a behind-the-scenes look at the making of Joshua Logan's classic movie starring Marilyn Monroe. That's all tonight on AMC. Great movies and the stories behind them.
say
Oh,
nothing
why is
to
it
me
so
about
dark in
getting
here?
engaged.
Let's get a little air.
Young man, I don't allow callers.
Jerry,
in these
come on,
rooms
get
at
out
9
of bed.
o'clock
We gotta be
this
in time
house.
for the
And
parade at
listen,
10:30.
young man.
Now, ma'am, I don't want any trouble from you.
Well, how
Come
do I
on
know
now.
that you're engaged to her?
Cherry, wake up and tell her you know me.
Oh, it's you!
You see, she knows me.
On March 15, 1956, filming on Bus Stop began with a parade through downtown Phoenix, Arizona.
Can you see everything?
Too much!
Some 25,000 locals braved 110-degree heat to cheer the parade, and filming seemed off to a strong, if sweaty, start.
Hey, there's old birds!
Reporters overwhelmed the location, eager to document Marilyn Monroe's return to the big screen.
We're from Life?
Life magazine?
That's right.
The photographers were running over my back with track shoes trying to get shots of her, you know. I was like working in a fishbowl. You were never alone. The press was constantly there.
But a bigger problem than the press was Bus Stop's vulnerable star.
Bus Stop was the first picture under the aegis of Marilyn Monroe Productions. Not only was she nervous as a cat, but everything really depended on her performance.
I've been trying to be somebody.
Anxiety took a dreadful toll on her, and she was convinced she was doing a no-good job.
Although Josh Logan was renowned for his patience during filming, Marilyn's erratic behavior eventually got the better of him.
I saw him blow once in a spectacular manner, shooting at Phoenix. And I guess we still call it magic hour. There's just about 10 minutes in there when the light is truly magical. And this was a very important, it was key scene where Marilyn actually, just really all she did was say a line and walk into the bus stop.
Right ahead.
Here's the Los Angeles
Right
bus.
here's the Los Angeles bus, lady, right through there.
Marilyn was redoing her face. No budging, Marilyn. And as we were starting to lose magic hour, just as the light was wrong, she made her appearance. And Mr. Logan, huge man that he was, just jumped in the middle of the town square with thousands of people around him. We're all roped up. And Mr. Logan jumped up and down shouting, and the audience was terrifying the natives and causing Marilyn to burst into tears yet again.
Well, I had to do something. He was making such a fuss in front of all those people.
She just was out of control. She was like a little baby. When you have an actress who wants 30 or 40 takes, and she would hold up the set for hours, and she wanted me fired because she didn't want another blonde on the film.
She was the most nervous actor I'd ever worked with. She used to break out into hives, and her body would be covered with these little red splotches, and they constantly had to cover it with makeup.
Bus Stop is as much a film about the crisis in the life of Marilyn Monroe as it is about Sherry.
Look where I'm going.
Where?
Hollywood and Vine. Look, straight as an arrow. Raven Gulch, Hollywood and Vine.
What happens when you get there?
What happens, honey? You get discovered, you get tested with options and everything. And you get treated with a little respect, too.
That's the little girl, Norma Jean Baker, who wanted to make something of herself by going to Hollywood and Vine.
In creating her performance, Marilyn received outspoken guidance from a friend on the set, Paula Strasberg, wife of Monroe's acting teacher, Lee Strasberg.
She depended terrifically on the Strasbergs for emotional support and psychological support, and therein lay the trouble.
After every take, instead of looking at Josh, she'd look over at Paula, and Paula would go, oh. So Paula would call the shots.
And I thought, Josh has to be so secure. He never complained. He just went right along with it, and he was immensely supportive of her.
But in spite of the many strains on the set, Marilyn's identification with the role was yielding powerful results.
That old black magic has me in its spell.
She put aside all of the artificiality and the mannerisms to learn that wonderful Oklahoma, Texas accent.
But what can I do?
That's better! Now let's keep a little quiet. Can't you see a little lady's trying to sing?
Okay, miss, I reckon you can go on with your song now.
In that unforgettable scene, That Old Black Magic, she gives a performance that is brilliantly terrible. Because Sherry, the singer, is really stretched beyond her talents as a singer.
I should stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name, and I'm a flame. A flame, a burning desire that only your kiss can put out the fire.
But as filming moved from the blazing sun of Phoenix to freezing temperatures in Idaho, problems began to multiply. From the start of shooting, Don Murray had fought a lingering illness. Now, the ailing actor had a fever of 104. Diagnosed with pleurisy, he was forced to breathe from an oxygen tank whenever off camera. Equally chilly was the real-life rapport between the two stars. Just days before the shoot was scheduled to end, tensions finally exploded.
Since it was her first movie since going to the actor's studio and learning to really use her own emotions in a part, she, using her own emotions, would lose track of herself. For instance, a scene, with a big emotional scene where she gets angry at me in the honky-tonk bar.
I just can't lie to you. And I can't marry you, and I ain't going to Montana with you. And goodbye forever.
Cherry, wait a sec. Cherry, wait a sec. Cherry!
In another take, she charged into me and wailed with her fist against my chest. Well, I braced myself, and she bounced off and fell on the floor. I totally broke character, and I said, "Are you all right, Marilyn? Are you okay?" And picked her up, and she just looked kind of stunned, and she looked back and said, "You ain't got the brains to give a monkey. Give me back my tail." And she grabbed the tail and ran off. But at the end, she stopped and looked at me, and this wicked look came in her eye, which it wasn't Sherry, it was an angry Marilyn. And she slashed me across the face with a costume, and it cut my eye. It didn't really hurt, but it was just, you know, I was appalled by that behavior. And so when she went off, I went after her. And Josh came over and said, "Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to tell that little brat off." And she said, No. He said, "Look," he said, you've done so well for now. He said, "We held everything together 1 week to do. Don't ruin it now."
When Backstory returns, Bus Stop finally arrives on movie screens, and a superstar risks it all at the box office.
Marilyn Monroe had a dumb blonde reputation,
We're on the rodeo.
but she certainly used her head when she insisted they darken the locks of co-star Hope Lang, leaving just one true blonde on the set of Bus Stop.
Oh, Cherry, I just gotta kiss you again. I can't help myself.
And while the tawdry club singer Marilyn plays here is no rocket scientist, this part let her prove she was a real actress.
Because I ain't the kind of gal you thought I was at all.
Watch Bus Stop tonight at 10:30 following the Backstory. Star. Icon. Marilyn. She was the biggest success story Hollywood ever produced.
Really?
And the greatest tragedy. A
American Movie Classics presents an original documentary that takes an in-depth look at the final days of Hollywood's most beloved and bewildering icon.
Marilyn Monroe.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Her steamy serenade to JFK. Her bitter fight with the studio that fired her.
She didn't have any respect for them.
And the lifelong heartache that consumed her.
She was like a caged animal. Nobody could get near her.
Then, see the groundbreaking reconstruction of her last film. And finally, the movie premiere the world has waited almost 40 years to see. Don't miss Marilyn Monroe, The Final Days, Friday, June 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern with an encore at 10. Part of Pure Platinum. AMC celebrates Marilyn Monroe. American Movie Classics. Great movies and the stories behind them.
In August of 1956, after weeks of bumpy filming, the opening weekend approached for Bus Stop, the first creation of Marilyn Monroe Productions.
No one but Marilyn could do justice to Bus Stop, this smash hit that had Broadway howling for more and more.
Earlier that year, America's reigning sex goddess had turned 30, and amid anxiety about her age, Marilyn was terrified over her response to the film. But as she discovered that summer, Bus Stop was about to become her greatest acting triumph.
The New York Times, for example, began its rave review by saying, "Hold on to your chairs, ladies and gentlemen. Marilyn Monroe is a major actress."
That's the sweetest, tenderest thing anyone ever said to me.
She may have put people through hell, but the end result was extraordinary. She's wonderful in the film.
Bus Stop also helped launch the careers of Marilyn's co-stars, Don Murray and Hope Lang, who after years of courtship finally married in 1956. 45 years after its making, Bus Stop has stood the test of time to be recognized as a cinema classic.
It was a wonderful script. It had a wonderful cast. The story's lovely. And Marilyn is wonderful.
Do you think you can ever forgive me?
The film not only proved to a doubting Hollywood that Marilyn Monroe could be a gifted actress,
I guess I've been treated worse in my life.
it also gave a fatally insecure young woman one of the few happy endings she would ever know.
Marilyn fulfilled everything she wanted, and yet her ending was tragic. In the movie, the character of Sherry, she always wanted to be this movie star and never made it. But she ended up with a man that really came to love and respect her.
Well, I'd go anywhere in the world with you now. Anywhere at all.